Well, this is the second and last video for week 2 of CIS 195. Let me share my screen and we'll talk about what we're going to discuss today. So under week 2, you will find this set of lecture notes slides called week 2 part 2 file paths. So you might want to download those if you want to follow those on your own computer. I have just opened them up here, so you can see them here in Zoom. And we're going to talk about file paths, the differences between absolute and relative file paths, and how that relates to linking to images and other web pages on our website. And then we'll talk about what's required in Lab 2. So let's start by talking about absolute versus absolute paths. So an absolute path name is a path name that starts from the root folder of a disk drive and gives the path all the way down to the current folder or current file, the desired folder or the desired file. Let me give you an example by opening up File Explorer here. So, and let me, I have a couple of File Explorer windows open, so let me use this one. So I've selected my D drive, and from there gone to my data 3 folder, and from there gone to my classes dash lane folder, and from there gone into my CS 195. I put the year 2024 on it, that folder, and then the week 2 folder, and in here I have some examples and some other stuff. At any rate, this path clear from the root of the D drive all the way through the folder structure data 3 down to week 2 would be considered an absolute path. As a matter of fact, I can get that path real easily. I can copy it by right-clicking up here up in File Manager and choosing Copy Address. Now I'm going to open up Notepad++, and I'm just going to paste that address in here. That is, I'm sorry, I'm going to paste that path name in here so that we can see what a absolute path name looks like. So the absolute path name might include the disk drive. In this case, D: is the disk drive. I'm just going to delete that because it may not include the disk drive as well, but it will start if you're starting the path with a / or a /, then you're really saying I'm starting from the root of the folder. And basically specifying how the software will have to traverse the folder to get all the way down to week 2. Now in Windows, you can either use a / or a /. And since you can do that, you probably just want to get used to using / because a lot of web servers that would have your web pages on it, they'll be Linux-based, they'll use the Linux-based operating system or some other Unix-based operating system, and they'll want the / to separate folders in the path name. So that's what I'm referring to here, is the fact that the / or / becomes the folder separation, as well as the designation for the root drive, the beginning of the, in other words, the top of the drive, if you if you specify it. Let's see. So another way to look at that is this. So if I go to my data 3 folder, notice over here in my navigation pane of Windows Explorer, I can expand data 3, okay? And from there I can expand lanes, classes dash lane, and from there I can expand 2024. Now here you're seeing the hierarchical structure of it. in this one, in this view. So we're starting at the root of the D drive, and underneath that a data 3 folder, underneath that a classes.lane folder, etc. Okay, all the way down to as far as we want to go. How many folders can you have in this hierarchy? Well, the Windows limit is nothing you'll ever run into. In other words, I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 folders deep here into week 2, and I still have folders within that. That's not a problem. Now let's compare that to relative addresses, because you will hardly ever use absolute path names in referencing where your files are, where your other web pages are, or where your images are in your web page. You'll pretty much always use relative path names to represent the path to a specific file. So a relative path starts from your current folder and specifies what is the path to get to some other folder or some other file. Okay, so let's look at some examples of relative paths. We've looked at a couple of examples of absolute paths. So I want to go to, I have a documents folder here, so I'm going to go to my documents folder. And underneath there, I've created a CIS 195 folder. And underneath there, I have a couple of HTML documents, so web pages. And I also have a folder called images. So let me go ahead and double click on index here. You've seen this page before, but notice what's happening is I'm having an issue with the image displaying. The alt information is displaying seal of the state of Oregon, but the image, it's not really displaying, and it shows that with that small little image icon there. That is, if I right click on this and choose view page source, and I look at the designation for where the image is, notice all that I have here is a file name. And yet that is not where the file is. In other words, this will only work if the image right here were in the same folder as index.html, because I'm just specifying the file name itself. It is very typical if you have multiple images to create a folder and put all the images in that one folder. And it's just easier to manage your images that way. So it's very typical to do that. So that's the structure that's been started here. So how do we correct that? Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to go open that folder. So I'm going to go to File. When my computer catches up with me here, I'm going to go to File, Open Folder, and I'm going to browse for that folder. So in my Documents folder, in my CIS 195, under Images, there's my images. Sorry, that's not where I wanted to go. I just wanted to open this folder right here, the CIS 195 images, because that has the web pages. So I don't really want to select images there. So now I'm seeing here in Visual Studio Code that I do have an images folder, and I do have 2 web pages here. I'm going to say yes, I trust these authors. Notice I can expand the images folder, see what's in it. I can select the index.html web page, and I can edit things here. So for this source attribute to work, I need the path, the relative path, from wherever the index.html folder is, which is underneath CIS 195, to where the image file is, which is in images. So what I want to do is change my path name here, click inside the first double quotes there for the source, and type the folder images. Because images is underneath CIS 195, index is within CIS 195, so I need to specify the folder name first, then the file name. I'm going to go ahead and save that with Control S, and I'm going to go back to the display of my web page and refresh it, and it finds the image now. So that is much more typical of how you will store images, for example, and how you'll specify path names in your web page. In your code, you'll typically use a relative path name rather than the full path name, right? What is that is the absolute path name all the way from the root of the folder. What would happen if I did that, if I used the full path name, so to speak? Okay, so the issue here is let me go ahead and copy the address from this URL and in Notepad++, paste that address. And you'll see that here in File Explorer, it's not even showing the full path name, but when I copied the address and pasted it here in Notepad++, it is showing the full path name, not just document CIS 195, but it's showing where documents really is. It's really on the C drive, in the users folder, in the folder that's represented by my current account on this computer, which is just called little r. Okay, let me show you that. So I'm going to go over here to the navigation pane, click on the C drive. Notice there is a users folder there. So now I'm under users. Notice there is a little R folder there. And under there, there's a documents folder. Okay. And there's my CIS 195 folder. So that's the full absolute path name. Can I use this in my code? And the answer is, well, yes, but it has problems. So let's just prove we can use it. I'm going to choose copy there, and I'm going to go to Visual Studio, and in front, Visual Studio Code, and in front of that double quote, I'm going to go ahead and paste the full path name, and notice it's missing a slash or backslash there. Doesn't matter that some of these are backslashes and some are forward slashes. Not on Windows, but this would matter elsewhere. So elsewhere, if I was really going to leave this web page this way, I would want to go ahead and change these to forward slashes, assuming it would be on some web server somewhere. But here's the problem with that. If I put these pages on a web server, that web server is not going to have this same path to where the images folder is. Okay, or to where the HTML files are. The likelihood it would have the same path is really slim. So by coding the absolute path name in here, although it may work on my computer, let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to hit Control S to save, and we're going to reload the page. And it does still work. I'm going to right click here, view page source, to make sure it's the full path that's being used, the absolute path that's being used, and it is. So it works, but if I transport this file to any other computer, it won't work. Therefore, in the labs that you submit in this course, to me, you should never be using absolute path names because they're not going to work on my computer. I don't have the same folder structure on my computer, so I can't test them properly. And when we start uploading to a web server, they're not going to work on that web server. So you should always use relative path names. Now, to back up just a little bit about some information about absolute path names. If you have spaces in your folder names and such, when you specify path names, you basically that path would have to be inside of double quotes wherever you specify it. Well, in our case, it already is because the source attribute requires those double quotes. But in other software, that's not necessarily that way. You might have to add the double quotes in certain instances. Okay. You can view the path the browser uses by hovering over the link. Okay. What I mean by that is you go to the web page and just hover your mouse over the link. Notice down in the lower left in the web browser, in the lower left corner, it will show it without clicking, just hover over. It'll show the full absolute path of where that particular file is. Okay, so that's a way to be another way to sort of see where that HTML file that this links to is. Of course, if we look at the code of where that's linking to, it's just using I'm going to call this a relative path name because the file is right there in the current folder, which is CIS 195. So we really view this as part of a relative path name. It's just that from that position, Oregon.html is not in a subfolder. But what if it were? Okay, let's look at another example. So what you want to do at this point is in Moodle, under week 2, download the South India multiple pages example so you can try some of what I'm about to show you as I'm showing it to you. Okay, so I already have that example on my disk here. And here it is called South India. I'm going to double click on it. So once you get that downloaded, then follow along, examine the folder structure with me here. Notice that there's an index.html in what I'm going to call the current folder. This is meant to be the home page, right, of the South India website, so to speak. When we double click on it to display it in the web browser, notice all it has is sort of a title and then a couple of course, it does have the title up in the tab, and then this is in a heading, and then a couple of links to web pages. And if I link to the top web page here, it goes to a web page about that city, okay? And then at the bottom, and it displays an image, and at the bottom of that, there's a couple of links to web pages. So if we click on back to home, it jumps back to home, right? And if I click on the bottom link there from the home page, then this is about another area or a broader area in India, basically, and it has a link back to home. Okay, there was one link I didn't try. On the first page, there's a link to the other web page as well. So there I've kind of tested all the links to make sure that they work currently. So let's look at what the code looks like then. We've seen how the web pages display. I'm going to go ahead and open the folder from Visual Studio Code to that website. So it's under my week 2 folder, under examples, under this South India folder. So that's the folder I want, okay? Because that's where the home page is. So that's now what we're calling the current folder, okay? And so here's index.html. Let me select it. And notice the relative path names that are specified. Okay, that is, there's another file, this link here goes to another index.html file that's in the, I guess that's pronounced Chennai folder, okay? And this link here, the second one on the web page, on the home page, it goes to a third index.html that's called Chennai area. So if we looked at the folder structure That's what we see. Here's index.html in the Chennai folder, Chennai area folder. Here's index.html. Notice there's two images in that folder, and in the Chennai folder, there's two images. Okay, so we're specifying the folder name slash the HTML page name because that HTML file is in a subfolder right from the current directory. So these are relative path names. Okay, so let's look at under Chennai here, let's look at what its index.html looks like as far as path names. So notice as far as the images go, this one here on line 13 and this one here on line 29 is just specifying the image name. And that's because this index.html is located in the Chennai folder. That is, this index.html is in the same folder as these images, so all we have to do is specify the image name to get those images to display. Let's scroll down, but notice here, to get to the HTML web pages, we have something we haven't talked about, and that's this designator // So with relative path names, / represents go to the parent directory. Instead of going down one directory, right? When we were thinking about from here, index.html, how do we get to any files in here? You have to specify the name of the directory. And by directory, I mean folder. Folder and directory are synonymous, okay? So you have to specify the name of the folder and then the file name, basically. But from here, from within here, to get back to the index.html under South India, you have to say, oh, I want to go up one level to the parent folder. I want to go up into South India. Well, you can't just say South India here, because then it would look for a South India folder underneath this folder. You have to say .. to say, look in the parent folder, and then under the parent folder, look in the Chennai area folder. So under the parent folder, go to the Chennai area folder, and there you'll find the index.html. Because remember, what that is referencing is the Chennai area right there, okay, which takes you to that other index.html. That is, it takes you to this one here. Okay, so .. goes up one level with relative path names. So therefore, and then you have to say go back down. So .. and then a slash to say, okay, now from there, from the parent folder, go back down into a folder. So then you'd specify what the folder is under there, right? So under .. that would be South India in the last example we looked at. That then it finds the folder Chennai area, basically, and under that it finds an index.html. What if you want to go two levels up? Then you use .. / and then another slash in the folder under that. If you want to go three levels up, it'd be .. / and then a slash for the folder under that. So in other words, you use .. to move up the folder structure, use the folder names to move down through the folder structure. So let's hover over some of these links in this these South India website that only has 3 web pages. They're all called index.html. By the way, they were all named the same file just to show you how this relative path name stuff worked. So if I hover over home, notice if you hover over home in the lower left corner of your web browser, it will display the path. If you're not seeing it in Zoom, it will display on your own computer. Okay, so let's move on. So we've talked about this already. Throughout your website, you'll use relative paths to specify path names, not just to your to your web pages, but also to your images, okay? Because the images may be in a different folder. And actually, let's restructure the South India website to put all the images in one folder and then correct our HTML code to find those files properly. We'll do that in just a second, okay? So I've already said this, don't use absolute paths because then when you zip your files, upload them to Moodle and I download them and try to run them and they're not going to run and I'm not going to spend the time correcting all your path names to make them work when they would have worked just fine with relative path names. So use relative path names. Then they'll work on any computer. So before we go to the Lab 2 requirements, let's restructure our South India. And you might want to try this as well and not instead of just watching. What I'm going to do is from the current folder, that is from the home folder where my home page is, I'm going to create an images folder because I said earlier, it's really common to just place all the images in their own folder. So let's say we had done that. So I'm going to grab these images from Chennai, okay, both of them, and I'm going to cut them from here, and I'm going to go paste them in the images folder, okay. Then I'm going to do the same for the Chennai area images. There's 2 of those. I'm going to select those and cut those with Control X and go to my images folder and paste those there. So I pasted all 4 images. Now, by doing this, I've broken the web pages. The images won't display, right? We can verify that just by going back to the pages and start clicking on them. And we'll see that the image isn't displayed there. The image isn't displayed here. The Chennai area, the images aren't displayed. And that's because the web browser is not finding them. Because if we go back to the original code, all that is specified are the file names. And now we've moved where those files are. Okay, so let's start with index under Chennai here. So where are those images going to be? Can you come up with that relative path name? So from within this folder, how do I get to this file called ChennaiSeal.gif? Well, we need ... to go up 1 level, which will be the same level as index.html, and then a /images to go down into that. So we have to add that to the path name to our source attribute. So we go ... /images /. So we'll not only do that here for this image, but we'll need to do it for the other image in this HTML document as well. So I'm going to save those changes. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing under the Chennai area index.html. We'll have the same issue. So what's the path from here? Well, it's the same thing. It's ... /images. And so all I have to do, I already copied that from the last web page. So I'm just going to paste it in here to the path name to my images, to both those images. I'm going to save that. And now we're going to go back and test our web pages again. So I'm going to go back to home, click on Chennai web page. And now I'm getting the images. Notice if I choose view page source, I've got those relative path names to find the images folder. And I'm going to check the other page as well. And there's those images. Okay, so that's mainly what this video was about, just going over how you deal with the fact that you're on a regular website where you might have dozens or even hundreds of web pages and images. You'll have to organize all the stuff into folders, and then you'll have to specify the relative path names in your HTML code in the source attributes to find those for the web browser to find those files. So now let's talk about the Lab 2 requirements. Okay, so on Moodle, you will find the Lab 2 instructions. If you haven't downloaded those yet, you should go ahead and download those. And they're showing hidden in this Zoom video right now, but when I'm done with this video, I'll unhide that so you can download it. Let me see. So let me bring up the Lab 2 instructions on my computer. So there's two parts to this lab assignment. Okay, in part one, you'll make a single web page containing a single review of some article or something. In part, or another web page or something. In part two, you'll add a home page and two more review pages to make a complete review website. You could be reviewing games if you want to, video games. You could be reviewing websites. You could review articles on websites. I really don't care what it is you're reviewing. I just basically want you to make sure that what you create on the page, that the text that you write makes sense, and that you include in part one for that single review page, you include these elements: a block quote element. The first video in week 2 lecture video talks about that, right? Talks about a figure and big caption elements, talks about using special characters like hearts, talks about nesting lists, horizontal rules, need two or more comments. Okay, one of the comments should be the name and date in the head element. I'm saying 2 comments because I want you to start thinking about as a web developer, when I'm creating web pages, what should I say in my web page that someone else who's looking at editing my HTML might need to know? And then once you have it all working, check it with the HTML validator. Make sure you haven't missed something that's an issue by running your HTML file through the validator. And again, the previous video went through that, right? Then in part 2, you're going to create a website with multiple pages and image files. So create a review site that contains a home page and at least 3 review pages. You'll use page from part 1 as one of your 3 review pages. The home page will have links to the 3 review pages. Name your home page index.html and then link it to those other pages. Put all the review pages and the images in separate folders. In other words, create a subfolder called reviews and put all your review pages in those, but leave your home page in the what we would call the home folder. Again, what I mean by that is like the South India example, you'll have your home page, okay, and then in that same folder you'll have images, and then you'll have another folder called reviews, okay. So I show you an outline of that, right? You'll have you don't have to call the folder home. That's just a reference to it, basically. Each review page should have at least one figure containing an image. So that's at least 3 images because you'll have 3 review pages, and put all 3 images in a folder called images, right? And then use relative path names to get to them properly. The 2 new review pages that weren't part of part 1, you don't have to have everything that's specified in part 1 for those. Just an image, and then what you want to have there to display the information you want to, what you're writing. These reviews don't have to be very long. That each web page doesn't have to be a huge number of words or anything like that. Just make it make sense, put a couple of paragraphs in there, that kind of thing. Except for that first review page, you do need everything that I've specified in for part one. Again, run all your web pages. You'll have 4 of them. Well, run them through the HTML validator before you submit the file. Zip all the files, the images, and everything into one folder and upload that to Moodle. So in the case of like to upload South India, what I would do is back here, I would right click on South India in Windows and choose send to compressed zip folder. It would create a zip folder like this, and underneath that, you're going to have all of the stuff. It's this zip file that you'll upload to Moodle, and then to grade it, I'll just unzip it. Okay, then one other thing about the Lab 2 instructions, I put the grading rubric that I'll be using to assign points to your lab. And so take a look at that, make sure what you produce after you've produced it and as you're testing your web pages, refer to this to make sure you've accomplished it all so that you can get all the points for the lab. Okay, that's all I had for you in this video. Good luck with Lab 2. Let me know if you have any problems or need any help with it.